Picture this, you're playing guitar on stage and you're about to step up for the big solo. All you have to do is turn on your reverb, change your delay setting, add a chorus, and hit a boost pedal, all within about a second to have the perfect tone. Unfortunately, that's a lot of tap dancing. Luckily, there is a way to do this and it doesn't involve hiring a guitar tech or have a super expensive switching system. All we have to do is use MIDI. Instead of manually turning pedals on and off, your HX Stomp can send MIDI commands to every pedal on your board instantly. That means one foot switch can change presets, turn effects on and off, adjust parameters within presets, sync tempo, or trigger multiple things all simultaneously with one foot switch. And understanding MIDI doesn't have to be hard. MIDI isn't that complicated once you understand the hierarchy of MIDI data. There's the channel, the program, the control, and the value. Let's break that down a little bit. The MIDI channel dictates what pedal is going to be receiving the command. Every pedal on your board that is capable of receiving MIDI should be on a separate MIDI channel. For example, on my pedal board, my HX Stomp is MIDI channel 1, my DD500 delay is channel 2, and my RV500 reverb is channel 3. This means that when I send a MIDI command to channel 2, only my delay pedal hears it. My reverb and my HX Stomp don't have anything to do on channel 2, and so they ignore it entirely. The next tier in the MIDI hierarchy is program changes. Very simply, program changes are just preset changes on a pedal. For example, let's say I wanted to send a program change of 0 on channel 2. What that means is that my delay pedal, which is on MIDI channel 2, is going to receive a program change of 0 and will pull up the first preset in the bank. One thing to note is MIDI exists on a scale of 0 to 127 for a total of 128 values. What that means practically is that by sending a program change of 0, it's going to open the first preset on my pedal. It's a little confusing, but if you always just think it's +1, that makes it a little easier. Program 0, preset 1. The next level of MIDI is control changes. These are simply parameters within a pedal. Think of it like knobs. So on my delay pedal, I have feedback, effect level, tone, and modulation depth on the pedal itself. However, with MIDI, I can go much deeper and access everything within the pedal. To find the MIDI CC number that you want to change for your control change, simply go to the manufacturer's website and find the manual for whatever device it is that you're trying to control. These will almost always have a chart in the back that tells you what command corresponds with what control. Once you know your control change that you want, you simply set a value of 0 to 127. For example, to turn on my delay, I send a value of 127 to control change 27. Every pedal handles MIDI a little bit differently, and so it's really important to check the manual of whatever pedal it is that you are trying to control or any other hardware device. These charts tell you what control change numbers control which function, as well as what values those controls are expecting to receive. Before we get everything programmed, there's a couple global settings that we need to adjust. Looking at the HX Stomp, let's make sure our global settings are configured so that we can send MIDI messages. We'll hit the 2 page buttons and then arrow over to our global settings. From here, we can scroll over to the MIDI page. You can see that my MIDI channel is 1. My MIDI through is turned off because I'm not sending anything into this pedal and sending it out. My RX MIDI clock is set to MIDI. That means that I will receive MIDI clock via the ports on the side. My TX MIDI clock or transmit MIDI clock is set to MIDI. This is going to allow me to send tempo information from the HX Stomp into my delays and reverbs. Tempo select is on preset, my BPM is there, and my snapshot CC send is on. This lets me send control messages when I change snapshots. It's also important on your receiving pedals to make sure that they are set up to receive MIDI correctly. So thinking through my signal flow, MIDI comes out of the stomp, into the reverb, into the delay. The actual audio path doesn't matter for this example. So I'm going to come in here to edit. I'm going to come down to MIDI. Hopefully you can see this. And I can see that my receive channel is channel 3. My transmit channel is the receive, which means that anything that comes in is going to pass through into the next pedal. Program change in is on. Program change out is on because again, I want programs that don't necessarily affect this pedal to pass through because there's more pedals after this in the chain. Same thing with control changes. I can see my control change in is on and my control change out is on. I also want to make sure that my MIDI sync, which is going to be tempo information, is set to external MIDI. MIDI in to out is set to MIDI, which again just means it's going to pass through. And my MIDI in and out is set to MIDI, which simply means that it's going to pass MIDI from this pedal into the next one. The other thing I like to do is change my foot switch 3 behavior to be a foot switch instead of a tap tempo. To do this, we go back into our global settings, so hit both pages. We go over to our global settings, and then if we arrow over to the foot switches tab, I can see that FS3 function is currently tap tuner. If I twist it, it is now Stomp 3. So let's take a look at a real-world example of how we can actually utilize this. For this example, we're going to use the song Washed by Elevation Rhythm because there's 2 specific parts. There's a verse, which is a super dry, relatively clean guitar, and then there's a little turnaround section going into the chorus where we need to turn on a chorus pedal, we need to turn on our delay, and turn on our reverb for basically one line, and then all of that needs to bypass again for the next verse. So let's jump into HX Edit and let's look at how to actually set this up. So I'm in HX Edit here. The first thing that I always do is I copy a preset for if I'm gonna make something song specific. So I've just copied my AC30 preset. So all this has is the amp and cab, a little bit of reverb, and then the effects loop is where my delay and reverb are routed through the Stomp. The first thing I'm gonna do is set the tempo here. So I just 2-finger click, and this song actually is 139 beats a minute. So we'll click that, and then you should be able to also see on the delay pedal that we're at 139 beats per minute, which means that we know that MIDI clock is sending everywhere the way it's supposed to. Next thing I'm gonna do is add my chorus pedal, because that's not in my normal preset. So we'll go to modulation and we'll add the 70s chorus. If this was actually for a Sunday morning or an actual gig of some kind, I would go in and adjust this. Just for this example, we'll assume this sounds exactly how we want. We're really looking at bypassing more than the actual tone. And let's turn it off because we're gonna say this first snapshot is our verse snapshot. So I can see here, this is snapshot 1. So we're gonna open up our command center. So we're gonna go up, you can either say Window Command Center or Shift Command M. So this shows us all of the MIDI commands that we can send per snapshot. So these lightning bolts are what they call MIDI instances. And then these 3 switches here are the switches on the Stomp. This is your auxiliary switch 4 and 5 if you're using external switches, and then this is your expression pedal 1 and 2. You can assign any MIDI command to any of these switches. So we're gonna use these instances here. So let's start with, we'll just go numerically. So my delay pedal is on channel 2. So we'll start there. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna build it out for my next preset actually. I'll explain that in a second. But basically I want to pull up the bank and program. So on channel 2, which is my delay pedal, we have to say bank 0. I want program 1, which is actually my second preset on the pedal because again, program starts at 0. So 0 is your first, 1 is your second. And we don't need a wait time because this is the first command the pedal is receiving. Next, we'll add our control change. So channel 2. I know from the manual that the bypass control on specifically the 500 series pedals is control 27. So we'll do that. And I want it to turn off. So that's a value of 0. And we're gonna delay this by 50 milliseconds. The reason we have to do this is when one pedal receives multiple commands, you have to make sure that they happen one command at a time. So we just delay the second command by 50 milliseconds. If we added a third command, we would delay it by 100. So it would go program change, command change, command change. We only have the two commands, so we'll just delay it by 50 milliseconds. Then we'll do the same thing for the reverb. So we'll do the bank and program. My reverb is on channel 3. Bank 0, and we're going to be using program 1. Again, it's the second preset, and it's the first command, so that can stay at 0. And then we will come here and the MIDI CC on channel 3. This is also 27 is the bypass, 0, but this one will wait 50 milliseconds. Last thing I'm going to do in this screen is I like to set up my foot switches to be able to control my snapshots. The way I see a lot of people doing this is if you hit the page button on your HX Stomp, you can get it to be snapshot 1, snapshot 2, snapshot 3. The thing I don't care for about setting it up this way is you lose any ability to turn pedals on or off that aren't tied to a snapshot. What I like to do is go into where it's this blank layout of your foot switches. And then again, you can do this on the pedal. It's a lot easier on the editor. I take this third switch, and this is gonna become my snapshot switch. So I'm gonna come over here and say, I want this to be HX snapshot. The two ways you can have foot switches behave on the HX Stomp is as a press and release. That's just like any normal pedal. Or you can have press and hold. That's gonna give you 2 commands per foot switch. And since we only have 3 snapshots available on the HX Stomp, that means that one foot switch gives us access to all 3 snapshots, and we still have our other 2 switches available to do whatever we need them to do. So instead of doing next, I'm actually gonna specifically say when I press the foot switch, I want it to go to snapshot 2. The only change that does compared to next is it gives me a graphic on the pedal itself that pressing it goes to snapshot 2. The way I always set these up is to press it goes up a level in the snapshot, so 1 to 2 to 3 to 1. And then when I hold, I go backwards. So, 1, 3, 2, 1. That's how I 90% of the time set this up. For this song, I'm only gonna use 2 snapshots, and so I'm actually gonna say when I press I want to go to snapshot 2, I'll still say when I hold go to 3. That way I have access to it if I decide that maybe I want my swell patch. I want that to be on snapshot 3 so I can grab it at any point during a service, but I'm not actually gonna program anything to that for this song. Super important step here, be sure to save. So now that we're done with this snapshot, I'll hit Command S and that will save it. And then, the last thing I forgot to do was to make sure that our bypass is set to snapshot bypass. That means that the bypass state of this pedal is going to follow, it's gonna be snapshot specific. One thing I do like to do is to actually put this on a foot switch, even though we're gonna be using MIDI or our snapshots to bypass it. I like the visual of knowing whether that effect is actually on or off, especially when I have foot switches available that I don't need to do other things. I'll just go into this bypass controller assign and we'll put it on foot switch 1. So we'll hit save, and that is now snapshot 1. If you want to cycle through snapshots fast in the editor, you can just hit Command 1, 2, or 3 for whichever snapshot you're going to. So let's jump to snapshot 2. And then again, we'll open our command center, Shift Command M. You'll notice I still have my instances here. However, they've all defaulted to the base thing. So we'll just have to set this up again. So for snapshot 2, I want everything to turn on. So we're gonna start with our delay pedal, bank 0, program 1, and that's the first instance, so that is 0 wait time. And then for our control change on channel 2, again, I know this is 27, and to turn it on, we have a value of 127, and then we're gonna delay it 50 milliseconds. We'll do the same thing for our reverb pedal on channel 3, bank 0, program 1, It's the first command, so we'll wait. We don't need to wait. And then for our control, channel 3, control 27, value 127, and it's the second command, so we'll wait 50 milliseconds. I'm also just gonna go through and set up my foot switch again. Because we're only using 2 foot switches, or I'm sorry, 2 snapshots, I'm gonna have this go back to snapshot 1, and this needs to be press and hold. This is gonna go back to snapshot 1, and if I hold it, I go to snapshot 3. That's not how I usually set it up. However, for this song specific, I think that makes the most sense. So we'll hit save, and now let's make sure that everything actually follows. Also, the chorus pedal is now on, and so we can make sure that that follows as well. So when we go to snapshot 1, everything should be turned off. That looks correct. And when we go to snapshot 2, everything has turned on. And we can do that from the editor, or we can also hit the foot switch and everything works. So let's actually hear what this sounds like in context. So I'm here with just my Fender Strat, and we're gonna play through this. For copyright, I'm not gonna put the actual track on, I'll just play the guitar part. So the verse is this really dry guitar, it just goes like this. And then the little interlude thing, we'll go to snapshot 2, and that goes, and then goes right back. That's the majority of the song, so let's just play through that a little bit and see how this actually can look. So that is how to use your HX Stomp to control the rest of your pedal board. You don't need an expensive switcher. You don't need external MIDI devices. It is all built into the Stomp, which is why it is such a great piece of gear. Hopefully this was super helpful to you. This isn't specific just to pedal boards. You can use this to control really any other piece of music gear, and MIDI all works the same if you just go your MIDI channel, your program, your control, and your value. So you can use this to control keyboards, you can use it to control Ableton Live if you're doing playback stuff. There's so many ways that this can work out. So hopefully that was super helpful. If it was, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you've got any questions, put them down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer those. And if you've got anything else, if you've got questions, if you've got other things you would like to see a video on, be sure to leave those in the comments as well. And I will do my best to continue making videos that hopefully help you make better music and make it easier.